The Darkhold is an ancient evil book full of dark magic and spells. It is believed that whomever reads the book runs the risk of not only losing their heart, but their soul as well. It is primarily used in the Doctor Strange comics and often tied to ancient evils such as Dracula. In 2021, Marvel published the Darkhold series, a collection of 7 issues, 5 one-off tales, and 2 pertaining to the main storyline. The series aims for a dark, bleak, and violent read. However, for all that Marvel tried to do, they just couldn't stick the landing. I'm going to go through this series just to show you how much of a mess it really is. Darkhold begins with Scarlet Witch having a nightmare of Chton, an ancient evil. She goes to find Dr. Doom, and I guess they just broke up because there's a lot of weird tension in their conversation. Basically, Doom found a real evil book made of flesh and wants to read it for God knows why. But Scarlet Witch says no, not to read it, because then Chton power will be released. And then, okay, Doom just goes to the other dark dimension by himself. And we see Scarlet Witch, been Doom's right-hand girl, Victorious, wonderful name, to try and read the book and find a way to stop Chton from coming back. They find out that there was a group of ancient warriors that defeated Chton originally and banished him. So Scarlet Witch obviously is like, well, we need a modern-day version of these guys, clearly. So we have the Dreamer Ironman, the Hunter Blade, the Artist Wasp, the Stoic Black Bolt, and the Fool Spider-Man. What the fuck? Scarlet Witch calls on them, and they all just arrive at Doom's place, and she's like, I need you to read this book, but not all of it, because then you go insane, alright? Cool? Doom just comes back, and he's all fucked up, because he got his shit rocked in the dark world, and he's just like, alright, I'm gonna go back. Then the gang is all like, you know what, fine. If it means saving millions, then we're game. Fuck it. They read the book, and then nothing happens. And then something happens, and Blade looks like Vampire Bishop. I cannot get over that. We see a group of heroes. They're like super fucking evil looking. They have a line where Spidey says you wanted the Darkhold Defenders, but you got the Darkhold Defiled. Which, alright. Scarlet Witch is like, fuck, and we cut into our first tale of terror. Alright, Iron Man's tale is probably a more familiar story out of all of these. It was featured on the internet for a while. That's how I first heard of these. And the story is basically, what if the Iron Man suit started to fuse with Tony's skin? That's kind of it. The story is told from Pepper's point of view, basically showing that she's not able to recognize the man she once loved anymore. In concept, this story is interesting, having someone slowly watch the person they love become unrecognizable and almost become a monster and really a shell of who they used to be. And then you have Iron Man basically giving himself over to this suit that really without it he wouldn't be alive. So he's just accepting defeat and succumbing to this madness and this evil because he feels hopeless without it. Very interesting in terms of what could happen, what you could do with that. This story doesn't really do anything interesting. It's really just kind of made to show the cool art of Iron Man becoming a giant flesh monster. Honestly, like when you put that aside, the story is nothing. It really is forgettable. There's not a whole lot of interesting dialogue. There's a lot of moments where it's Pepper sort of speaking to herself, kind of like a diary entry, but it just kind of seems long-winded, and nothing really of importance is conveyed or said through these passages. It's a baffling one because I feel like if this story may have had a couple more issues, it could have been something truly haunting and probably even scary, but with just the one issue, it kind of feels like a cheesy B-movie more than anything else. And really, I feel like this comic gained traction because of the art and because of the creepy atmosphere of it all, but when you actually read it, that's really about it. the art is really cool, but the story's only so you kind of feel like it's a letdown. It's not a strong leg to start on. Alright, the second comic is Blade. Blade's comic opens up with a backstory. Apparently in this world, a vampire terrorist named Deacon Frost caused an event called the V-Wave, turning almost all the population into vampires. They don't really explain how, but that's what happened. We see Blade killing vampires. We meet another young half-vampire named Amadeus, because isn't that funny? Isn't that fun? Isn't that so much fun? He sees Blade kill a human and starts to flip out because Blade doesn't do that. So Amadeus basically teams up with the Prowler, Citizen V, and Silver Sable. They try to break into Kingpin's, who's the head vampire in this, his estate, because he apparently has a way of reversing the V-Wave effect. Okay, basically in this world, Blade is still half vampire, half human, but the vampire side is taking over. Alright? He kills Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, the head vampire, by gassing him with a vaporized silver. Alright, we're all on board? Sweet. There's also a moment where Blade asks V why he calls himself V, and he says it's for Wagner, but because of his accent, he pronounces it Wagner. Revealing that in this world, instead of Zemo, it's Nightcrawler that's Citizen V, which is fine. You could change whatever, who cares, but this one's a little confusing because Citizen V is because of the Thunderbolts, and the whole reason the Thunderbolts were around was because the Avengers died. So now I'm wondering if the Avengers died in this universe, and now I'm wondering about Genosha, and I'm just not thinking about the comic I'm reading. So basically Amadeus just gets thrown out of a window in daylight, so I guess he just dies. I don't really know. And then Blade becomes the king of the new world, or something. This story is all over the fucking place, and it really does end before you can figure out what the hell is going on. I guess Blade is Super Blade now, and I don't know why we had a young vampire kid set up the whole story if he just fucking dies at the end. I don't know if it's supposed to evoke like some kind of emotion or something, because I really could give less of a shit about Amadeus. Okay, so I've tried numerous times to write and record this specific issue because this story goes to some unexpected places and deals with some very dark topics, so fair warning, I guess. I don't know. This story deals with Wasp feeling isolated from her husband Hank, who's Ant-Man, but Nessie is currently Yellow Jacket. I will say, out of all these comics, this one is probably my favorite. Right off the bat, I recommend it. The story may be a little shaky, but the art style really sells it, and the twist really helps too. So if you want to read it, I guess just skip this part. But Wasp feels isolated. Everyone around her is asking if she's okay and sort of if she's happy. They fight Kang, and he says she looks like his wife and that he'll treat her like royalty, and then he fucks off. All this basically builds up to the finale. Now, before we get there, I would like to point out that there is an Avengers storyline where Yellow Jacket strikes the Wasp, and they separate for a while. In this, at the end, Yellow Jacket hits Jane, but then she stabs him to death. So, a bit of a twist there, huh? I like the idea of using toxic relationships and feeling alone and isolated in a loveless relationship where you are making an effort that's ignored by your partner. I do think, like a lot of these issues, this one specifically would have gained so much from being fleshed out in maybe a multi-issue, like one-off, but I would have loved so much just to see what happens after this, and it's sad that the strong idea and execution is hidden away in this messy mess. The Black Bolt comic has genuinely an interesting premise, however you really have to turn your brain off for it. In this story we see Black Bolt on a Pinel moon, a moon used by his people as a death sentence of sorts. They send prisoners there, but fly in supplies for them every now and then. He has no memory of why he's here and what happened, but he is stricken by visions which slowly piece the story together. Basically, Black Bolt has a brother Max, and Max wants to be king, so he hatches a plan to disguise himself as one of Black Bolt's ministers. But we find out that that was a fake plan, and his real plan was to disguise himself as Black Bolt. They invent a machine that displays random memories of anyone that passes through it, in hoping they could see which one is Max. However, we also find out that Max got Black Bolt's memories implanted into his head along with his powers, which the fact that just a doctor can do this makes that doctor one of the most strongest people in the fucking Marvel universe. I don't care what the fuck you say. Black Bolt has no idea whether he's himself or Max, and we, the reader, don't know either. And I think that's great. I think leaving off with a cliffhanger is a great way to make your material stick. It forces the reader to think about it way after they've finished it. The problem this story really faces is that there's just so much nonsense in it. Again, I know it's a little ridiculous to make this complaint, given that it's a fucking Marvel comic, and this is a world where there are men in flying capes and giant green monsters, but to add on all of this into one comic is a bit crazy. To have Max get not only Black Bolt's powers, but his memories implanted into him by some doctor, that's fucking wild. And we don't really find out why Black Bolt is on here. What happened to make them think that he is actually Max? He's just on this moon. Like, I think out of all the comics, this one has a really strong premise and interesting ideas. It just doesn't really stick the landing. There's much to be desired and just an overall lack of content. Much of these stories feel like they would have been better if they were fleshed out over a series of comics, but so far, again, cramming this whole idea into just one comic, wouldn't you know, once again, hurts the final product. It's like fucking Groundhog's Day, isn't it? I'm Spider-Man, and I don't have time for memories. That is what's written on the first page when you open this story. Spider-Man's story is everything is literally falling apart and he's webbing it back together, but the webbing doesn't hold, so he's constantly having to re-web everything and slowly losing his fucking mind. Reed Richards is a giant flesh puddle and tries to help Spider-Man create a stronger web fluid. He comes up with a material made from his finger. Alright? He has a moment where he tries to befriend Venom the symbiote, because we find out that Eddie's dead and the symbiote's just been kind of coasting on his dead body. And Spider-Man tries to help the symbiote, but the symbiote refuses. And I guess it's supposed to be sad? I don't fucking know. Throughout the story, we basically see Spider-Man's mental health just deteriorating rapidly. And throughout the comic, he's on the phone with Gwen Stacy. And immediately, I'm like, alright, well, she's dead. There's no... Why are we doing this and we're not seeing her? Like... And guess what? Yeah, she's dead. So we basically realize Spider-Man's got nothing going on. He really has nothing to fight for anymore. So he just fucking kills Reed Richards and uses his skin as web fluid. And everything's fine. Everyone's back to normal. And that's it. That's just the end. Okay, now that all the tales are done, the Bat Team gets sent to the Darkhold world and fight the big bad, but then they start to lose until Mystery Man shows up to save them, and then Wanda and Victor show up and save the day. Scarlet Witch absorbs Big Bad's powers, so now she's like really, really strong. Anyway, everything goes back to normal, and mysterious guy we find out is a hero named Omega the Unknown, which I had to look up. I had absolutely no fucking clue who this guy was. They're really pulling out all the stops for this one, huh? And that's it. That's it. Wanda wins. That's it. The end. Reading this series, I was just super confused on where the story was going, the point, and that sometimes what even is the plot. Having these characters face their fears is interesting. I think that's cool. But when they're all done and you get back to the main storyline of the comic. It just, alright, they win. They face their fears. That's it. And then when we see them afterwards, we don't really see them affected at all by what they just went through. Almost as if they were just kind of like asleep and then just woke up. It just feels so fucking lackluster. And just at the end, you just really feel like absolutely nothing fucking happened. And it's just an insane amount of time wasted on just these characters, and even the artists, their time they put into this. It's just fucking crazy. I feel like Darkhold, this comic series, exists because of Marvel Zombies, and the success of that, having Marvel just make all their comics violent and gross. It's weird. I'm sure there are people out there that like this stuff, but for me, Marvel never really seemed like the violent, gross, comic side of things. They, over the years, obviously have cleaned it up since like Disney owned them, but for a while they were just making gross, dark stuff, and it really feels like they're just doing it to be violent. Like, oh, look how cool and edgy they are. That never really appealed to me. It may make me interested in what you're trying to do, and if you're trying to shock someone, yeah, I'll be interested, but being interested only can go so far, Like, you have to be invested and wanting to know why this is this way, and maybe are they trying to say something through this. And with these comics, there's nothing is to be said.